Good evening, everybody. And good evening, Bree and Scott. Welcome. And all of us here. So it's kind of miraculous when I'm paying attention. I remember how miraculous it is that every one of us came here. There's a lot more possibilities in the decision tree of this day and life in general that would absolutely have you somewhere else, right? So it's kind of amazing. We all ended up here. And it's a good practice for us, isn't it, to try to not just take things for granted. That if we're paying attention every day, everything is a miracle, really. And I was also noticing when I pay attention, I see something new that I never saw before, pretty much every day. Today's entry is going to sound a little strange. But when Hana, as the chant leader, is the Kokyo, is announcing the list of worthy teachers of the past that we dedicate this to, and you're bowing, standing, and I'm all the way down on the mat. So it turns out, if I get all the way down, I didn't have my glasses on then. That's probably why it worked. My eyebrows get pushed this way, and I can see them. I never looked at my eyebrows before. That must have been available to me about 1,000,000 times before, but this is the first time I noticed. I'm like, what's all that hair? I don't have hair. Oh, I could see my eyebrows. What did you see today that was new, that you never saw before? And sure, we have a certain cultural bias to decide which things are interesting and important and which things aren't. And that's probably not likely to make the list. People look at you a little funny. You're like, you know what happened? What I had today? Amazing. I saw my eyebrows without a mirror. No mirror. Gotta have enough eyebrow though to pull this off. Don't try this at home. Anyway, it's funny trying to teach the Dharma. You can only say something very specific to yourself, which actually doesn't make any sense to anybody else. In the hopes, that everyone will say, "Oh yeah, I have my own version of this. I have my own everyday miracles." Can I have a chant book? I forgot to grab one. Thanks, Marty. So my little project here for the year, and Chris and I both worked on this, is to do talks on all the little texts in the chant book. And so we're halfway through the year, and I think we're less than halfway through the chant book, but that's okay. I was just trying to remind myself, what is all the stuff that we've accumulated in here? And I think there's maybe 4 categories of pieces of text in here. One is a short chants to remind us to pay attention to our eyebrows or whatever else it is we're doing, that are little awareness poems, little gathas. So we just chanted one of those about the talk to remind ourselves of the wondrousness of speaking about the Dharma. So we have little gathas, little reminder chants. We have a couple of sutras, and so sutra, that word was used in Buddhism to refer to words that, in theory at least, were spoken by the Buddha. So although he's not mentioned by name, we know that the Heart Sutra that we chanted a little minute ago is inspired by the words of the Buddha, is the words of the Buddha kind of by proxy. It's a sutra. And then we also have the somewhat mysterious prayers and mantras. Longer mantras get called dharanis, where it's more about the sound, the power of sound, than about the meaning. And so I talked about one of those was it just last week? I can't remember anymore. 2 weeks ago, talked about one of those. And then we also have some poems a couple of Zen poems. So that's what I want to talk about tonight. And we have essays by Dogen. Maybe that's 5 categories. Last week we were talking about the hymn to the perfection of wisdom, which is we also just chanted on page 9 in here. And I was reflecting that it's in a wisdom text, but it's actually kind of a prayer. It's kind of anomalous in this big long wisdom text to have this prayer to a personification of wisdom, to the perfection of wisdom as a female being. And she is lovely and holy. And I was saying I don't notice prayer as much in Buddhism, but I think it's not that it's not there, like my eyebrows were never not there, but just that I haven't been noticing it. And after the talk, someone reminded me that we do a prayer at a Zen, Red Cedar Zen practice almost every day that I actually wrote. I just didn't realize it was a prayer. So if you haven't yet been to our 7 a.m. Monday through Friday Zazen practice, just so far been all online, but it's possible there may be offered some from the temple as well in the fall. Our Shuso is fired up. But anyway, after the half-hour meditation, we do a little simple version of the chanting service we just did, very brief. And then we say a prayer together. It's a prayer about the precepts, which are the Zen ethical guidelines to encourage us to pay attention. And because I wrote it as part of a precepts class, I never really thought about it as a prayer, but I think it's a prayer. See what you think. I'll tell you what, I'll tell it to you and you can decide if it, I don't know what the criteria are exactly for a prayer versus a non-prayer. But it goes like this. How does it start? Oh Buddha, yeah, thank you. Oh Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, please concentrate your hearts on me. I, say your name, Buddha's disciple, greet the new day with humility and joy. May I today in all actions of body, speech, and mind affirm life, give generously, keep the mind clear, treasure the body, something and learn from strong emotions. Be courageous and kind in speech, thank you. Open to and heal through strong emotions, and return to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha on every breath. I fumbled it a little bit, but you heard the gist, I think. Is that a prayer, do you think? I guess it is. Oh, yeah, okay. So we do a prayer all the time. And just a shout out to our dear Dharma sister, Nancy Welch. I wrote that in one of our first ever precepts class, which I co-taught with Nancy Welch. Because we gave that as a homework assignment to the precept students, and I thought I better do the assignment. So I wrote that 20 years ago or something. So maybe there are miracles and prayers all around us, and if you're a little allergic to words that are used more strongly in the Christian traditions, sorry. Well, seems like prayers are here. But you can call them something else, you know. I think I called that a verse. I think I always called that a verse, but maybe it's a prayer. So since Zen is so hard to sort of talk about in any useful, direct way, except you go on about funny little things. No, I don't want to look at that right now. Sometimes the Zen masters write poems, you know, to try to express something of the feeling and the spirit and give a felt sense of the teachings. And in our chant book we have 2 famous Zen poems. One of them Chris did 4 really interesting talks on about a month ago. And all these are on the website. You can turn off Netflix and turn on Red Cedar Zen Dharma talks anytime and watch them, listen to them. So she gave talks on one which is called The Song of the Jewel Mirrored Samadhi by Master Dongshan, who is I think 9th or 10th century, maybe it says in here. Yeah, he's in the 800s, 9th century. So we're just going to go back another century, 2 generations earlier in the Zen lineage chart. to Master Shurto's merging of difference and unity. And so this might be useful. Well, actually, I'll say a few things, and then maybe we'll get the chant books out so you can read it with me. So a few things about Master Shurto. He kind of plays a pivotal role just kind of in between two big, Chinese Zen moments. The biggest moment of all we'll hear about this summer, which is the fabulous story of the sixth ancestor, Wei Neng. There's a whole sutra about that Chris and Hannah give talks about in the summer, actually starting in 3 weeks or something. It's a very famous story of a brilliant but sort of intuitive and actually illiterate new monk who just gets it and has really dramatic interaction with the monastery he ends up with and the teacher and the head student who thought he was the one who got it. And I won't spoil the story because it's a fabulous tale of Zen. So anyway, our tonight's teacher, Master Shurto, was a student of Master Wei Neng towards the end of Wei Neng's life, and then he went on to study with 2 other teachers. The most important of whom, who shows up in a lot of stories, is Master Nanyue. So born in 700, maybe lived to 790, and all these dates and details are a little bit suspect historically, but it's what the stories say. He ended up receiving a really interesting and kind of cool Dharma name, and so the Dharma names have a little bit of meaning in them sometimes. When he made it to the 3rd teacher, his kind of penultimate teacher's place, Master Nanyue's monastery, he actually got permission, or maybe just, insisted, that he wasn't going to live day to day in the monks' hall. Maybe he thought it was a little too busy in there. And of course, it was a very strict regimen with silence most of the day, very particular meditative activities you do all day, every day. The so-called day off is like you sleep 1 more hour but do all the same things, So maybe he wanted to somewhere even quieter than that. So he built a hut on a big boulder somewhere above the monastery. And all the monasteries are in mountains, sometimes literally, sometimes a little more figuratively, so there's boulders around. And he ended up receiving a new Dharma name from this last teacher once he'd been practicing in this hut for a while. The first character, I don't know if this is big enough to see, but here's his Dharma name, Shurto. And Shur actually means stone, like a rock. And this little square here is like a rock, and then this is like an overhanging kind of ledge above the rock, which also kind of somehow looks like a hut a little bit. So that's stone, Shur. Seki in Sino-Japanese. They call him Sekito. Yeah, Sekito. Shurto, Sekito. Yeah, Kisen is the second two characters. Thanks. And then To or Tao or To actually literally means head. Stonehead. Like deadhead, Stonehead. Sometimes it gets translated as monk, but it actually means head. Stonehead. Or blockhead, right? Maybe his teacher was giving him a little hard time, being so stubborn that he couldn't hang out with the other monks and had to be off there in his little hut doing meditation all day. And so we don't really know actually all that much about this teacher's life, and he was seen as important later more than when he was alive, which is often the case. So I can look forward to that. Long after I'm dead, someone will think I was important. At the moment, not so much, which is good. But what survives from him is pretty much just these 2 poems. And it's all in Chinese, right? So it's these kind of dense little blocks of characters, which have a kind of a way of holding together, just something about the way they're constructed. It's not actually that much text to get a lot of meaning, and you can copy them or put them on stone or put them on wood blocks and print them, and so a good Chinese poem has a way of sticking around for 1,000 years, which this one did, 1,500 actually. So the poem, I'm not going to geek out on the poem title actually, because we don't have time. The poem is translated here as the merging of difference in unity. And it's something about the way it appears to us like everything's kind of chunked up. I'm me and I'm not you, we're separate. A chair is not a table, they're separate, They're never going to get confused, Table's not going to be, hey, I'm a chair, right? Chair's not going to say I'm a table, actually. You're just not looking carefully. So things appear to have this quality, and we don't think about it, we take it for granted. And the core idea in Mahayana Buddhism and all Buddhisms, but we really emphasize it, is yeah, you can think that way, nothing's stopping you, but you're never going to be at peace. You're always going to be wanting this thing or that thing to be better or away or more or less, and you're the biggest piece of stuff that there is, and you're never going to be content with the you that's that kind of thing, that's separate and sort of fixed in its position. But that's not wrong exactly, Nobody's saying that this isn't an altar table. That would be dumb. But it's not just an altar table. So Zen is always trying to play with these ideas. And the poem from Dongshan, by the way, so Dongshan is then Shirto's grandson in the Dharma, his student's student. So that's why later they decided he was really important because Dongshan was important. And the only reason Dongshan's important, his teacher has to be important, his teacher's teacher has to be important, and back it goes, That's just kind of how it works in Zen. I guess that means I need a really important student to be important after I die. I'll have to think about that. Never mind that. So let's actually open up the chant book, and not all of you are familiar with this. Let's chant it through once, and then we'll look at the first 3 or 4 paragraphs and see what we can discern, and then we'll talk about it together. So page 11. Or morning service B? C? Maybe C. Okay, ready? I'll do the title and then we can just chant together. Merging of difference and unity. The mind of the great sage of India is intimately transmitted from west to east, while human faculties are sharp or dull. The way has no northern or southern ancestor. The spiritual source shines clear and flow on in the dark. Grasping at things is surely delusion. According with sameness is still not enlightenment. All the objects of the senses interact and yet do not. Interacting brings involvement, otherwise each keeps its place. Sights vary in quality and form. Sounds differ as pleasing or harsh. Refined and common speech come together in the dark. Clear and murky phrases are distinguished in the light. The 4 elements return to their natures, just as a child turns to its mother. Fire heats, wind moves, water wets, earth solid, eye and sight, ear and sound, nose and smells, tongue and taste. Thus with each and everything, depending on these roots, the leaves spread forth. Trunk and branches share the essence, revered and calm. Each has its speech. In the light there is darkness, but don't take it as darkness. In the light is light, but don't see it as light. Light and dark oppose one another like the front and back foot in walking. Each of the myriad things has its merit expressed according to function and place. Phenomena exist, box and lid fit, arrow responds, arrow points meet. Hearing the words, understand the meaning. Don't standards of your own. If you don't understand the way right before you, how you the path as you walk. Progress is not a matter of far or near, but it are confused. Mountains and rivers block your way. I respectfully urge you who study the mystery, do not pass your days and nights in vain. And by the way, about halfway through that chanting, I remembered something which I want to share. There's a particular way of doing every little teeny thing in the Zen hall. So here's the particular way, just so you know, of holding the chant book while chanting. You put your thumb and your little finger on the inside on opposite pages, and then your three fingers together on the outside, and then you actually hold this up so that it's like eye level, so that you can be really upright with an open chest, lots of room to breathe, and this is kind of the posture in general. Zen is like anti-slouch boot camp, you know, which is maybe why I need it. So anyway, so it's not like this so much. It's like very dignified and, you know, hopefully not pretentious, but dignified. Anyway, if you forget again, it's not a big deal, but maybe you'll remember halfway through the next chanting, like, wasn't there a thing? And oh yeah, that feels good. It's a good way, especially this exact format of book is well designed for this way of holding things, yeah. So let's look at the first paragraph. The mind of the great sage of India is intimately transmitted from west to east, while human faculties are sharp or dull. The way has no northern or southern ancestors. So whatever this understanding is that Zen is encouraging us to get in our bones, it came from somewhere, you know. We didn't just make it up. We've received it, you know. So there's a long lineage of giving and receiving. Sometimes we say warm hand to warm hand, or, yes, eyebrow to eyebrow. We say that. And so the great sage of India, you probably can guess who that is. Buddha, yeah, so this is Buddha. And so west to east is because it's, you know, eastern China versus India. So India's west, you know. That's why it's west to east. So these teachings came to us from India. And now we could say, you know, from east to further west, or depending on which way around the globe you want to go, you know, to get to here, from China and Japan. From China, it kind of went in multiple directions, right? South into Korea, Vietnam, you know, into Japan and a few other little places, some of which it didn't persist in. So this came from somewhere. You know, we're grateful to have received it from somewhere. And not just from somewhere, from someone. Next it says human. Human faculties are sharp or dull. So Dogen talks about this too, actually, our great Japanese founder. Talks about how intelligence or lack of it does not matter. I hope we all feel reassured when we hear these kind of lines. Same thing here. While human faculties are sharp or dull, so it's not a sharp faculties kind of thing, right? It's not a figuring it out kind of thing. This is saying. And sure, you can and should use your intellect and your intelligence, and you know, read Dharma books and go to the classes and think about all this stuff, but not think that your understanding somehow is created by that. It's just part of the path, whether your faculties are sharp or dull. And we, because of our kind of messed up understanding of intelligence, you know, we're a culture that could invent something like an IQ test, you know. I was just remembering, there's one question of the IQ test, which I was administered when I was like 10, that I remember. I don't know why I remember just this one. And it's typical of the questions, and you'll laugh when you hear what it is, if you weren't subjected to the IQ test. There's a little picture of a little rectangle on the paper, and it says, Joe's job is to mow the lawn. What pattern should he use with his mower? And you're supposed to draw a little pattern of mowing. I did a spiral. What'd you do? I don't know if that gave me more points or less points. Yeah, probably the most common is probably back and forth. Anyway, so we have this funny idea of sharp and dull, right? That you can have a higher IQ or a lower IQ, and later, psychologists and learning theorists tried to make it a little more interesting, like, well, maybe so, but there's different kinds of intelligence. You could have more of number one and less of number two, and which is just ridiculous in a different way, right? But anyway, so sharp or dull doesn't matter. And the next one is actually sort of a reference to the situation at the time of Shurto's writing this, that there was kind of sort of two schools of Zen. They called it Chan in Chinese. Chan, two schools of Chan, same character, different pronunciation. A northern school and a southern school. And this guy's teacher, the famous one in the story, Huineng, is famous for going south, sort of starting the southern school. So this, in a way, is kind of like very inclusive of Master Shurto, who was the disciple of the very famous founder of the Southern School. Instead of saying the true way is the Southern School, he says, the way has no southern or northern or southern ancestors. So really looking at, again, these separate objects, separate schools, separate this, separate that. No, it's not exactly that. So that's kind of his warm-up. Where did this come from? Where did this come from? And the next paragraph we start talking about, well, what is it? What is this something? How does it function? How do we recognize it? How do we practice with it? The spiritual source shines clear in the light. The branching streams flow on in the dark. So this is the famous image of this text, of this poem. Light and darkness, and the metaphor of rivers and streams, which is a common image in lots of Buddhist teachings. And also remember, these folks spent less time indoors than us, And the Chinese by this time had done plenty of massive modifications to the landscape, but, less so than now at least, right? So they're more often around actual rivers and mountains, and we are too, we are too if we're paying attention. So it's not surprising that they thought about things like streams and rivers and mountains a lot. But anyway, so it's right here. It shines clear in the light. It's not hidden. It's not something you have to do secret practices and get special initiations and sign up for the right workshop that probably costs a lot of money. No, it's right in front of you. It's already right here. It's clear. It's here in the light. And it's not just that. There's also something very mysterious about it, beyond anything that we can describe. Even though we can see it in the light, we can't describe it, we can't quite lock it down. Because it is also a branching stream flowing in the dark. You can't see even the way it's branching out in little rivulets. You can hear it probably, right? And you know it's there, but you can't see it. So you can see it and you can't see it. And so then the next line is, well, what do you do? How do you practice, if that's the case? If something that's so important and so precious that will change our lives and heal our world is both obvious and mysterious at the same time, what do we do? Well, he starts with what not to do, which is not unusual in the teachings. Grasping at things, right? We know this impulse, right? It's like, you go to a lecture or a movie or listen to a song or whatever, and something in it really strikes you. What's your first impulse? Right? I gotta remember that. I'm gonna write it down on my phone immediately. I'm gonna Google it. Where'd that come from? Well, I want to remember that important thing. So that's not it, right? That's delusion. That's just spinning in the wheel. And the minute you grasp at it, and this is also true, right? Have you had this experience, like you write down, like are you a note taker? Maybe note taking is less in vogue now, I don't know, but you're note taking away, and you're like, oh, that was so cool, I gotta write that down. And then you put your notes on the shelf, and then you find them again when you're cleaning your room 10 years later or 6 months later, and you read it and go, why did I write this down? Right? Because you're grasping, right? It's just delusion. But non-grasping is, okay, so I won't grasp. I'm just with it. I'm just with it. I'm chill, right? I'm just with it. So that's the other alternative, maybe, if we're thinking about things in this or that kind of way. So according with sameness is just being with. According with sameness is still not enlightenment. So I'm in the middle of the second paragraph now on page 11. Okay, so these actions are somehow not quite it. Well, how do I find out more? With the senses. So next we have to talk about the senses. And really recognize that although we're great thinkers and overthinkers, actually everything that we experience at all comes in through the five senses, and then Buddhism kind of sees the mind as sort of a sixth sense in a certain way too. And so he's saying, well, okay, so what if you really pay attention? Really take in reality much more carefully. And this is a great practice, you know. None of this is these are all good things to do. It's not they're bad things to do. It's good to try to understand, even if it's a little graspy. Like, it's what you got. It's good to just be with and let go of that. Like, But then thinking that that's the whole thing, right? That's what he's saying. No, no, no. Go deeper. Go further. So now he says, open your senses. Really tune in. I'm a fan of tree gazing. Have you done the practice of tree gazing? You should try that. I haven't done it in a little while. I should spend more time with it. Just really sitting in front of a tree and just really watching it, really breathing with it. You know, do it for a while, you know. See what you notice. Open the eyes, open the ears, open the skin. Feel the breeze, right? Smell. Maybe don't eat the tree, but, you know, taste. Right, all the senses. And when we do that, there's a connection, right? It's not like I'm over here. When you really tree gaze or really eye gaze with someone you love, right? This is popular, you know, and horribly frustrating when it's not working, you know, or you don't have access, you know. There's eye gazing too. Next he says interacting brings involvement, and that's true, isn't it, you know? When you really tune into something, it's you feel, even if your mind has like this whole theory of I'm over here and the tree's over there and I know there's this much space between us, it doesn't actually feel that way. You are the tree. Tree is you, right? Sometimes the bark kind of starts to shimmer a little bit. Check it out. Wow. So that's interacting, that's connection. Otherwise each keeps its place. I'm the tree and I'm not the tree, right? So don't get hooked, right? Don't get hooked on that. Don't then like, okay, I'm going to sell all my stuff and be a full-time tree gazer, and then I could be the one doing the workshops, you know, or something. So also allow a tree to be a tree. You don't need to try to make it into something else. It keeps its place. And the tree, of course, doesn't need our help with any of this. It's fine, but, you know, we have to do our karma and spin ourselves up and down and see what we can learn. And I think that's an easy way to misread all this kind of weird sounding teaching sometimes, especially even when they're a little bit directive, and there's a little bit of directiveness here, just a taste of it, is you might misunderstand and say, okay, well, I don't have the right motivations, the right understanding, I'm not ready, I'm not advanced or something, so I shouldn't do anything. You know, I will just watch Netflix after all. That's not what they're trying to say. That would be a terrible thing, right? They're encouraging us to practice deeply, to see the spiritual source in the light, to listen to the branching streams in the dark, to grasp, to let go, to tune in, to connect, to realize that there's nothing, that connecting is just connecting, it's okay. And to keep really paying attention. So now we go on with the senses. Sights vary in quality and form. So there are different things that you see, right? They appear to be different, you know. You look at the tree; it does look different than the chair, even though you know that the chair is it's a tree, right? It's made of a tree. No tree, no chair. But these vary in quality and form. Sounds differ as pleasing and harsh, so same thing. And then imagine all the senses in there. And they're often sort of like abbreviating in these texts too. You're just supposed to know they mean all 5 or 6 senses to really see diversity. Really tune in and really see diversity. That is true in its way. And then when you see this, Refined and common speech come together in the dark. Clear and murky phrases are distinguished in the light. So now we're bringing language into it, which means we're bringing, the thinking mind and cognition into it. And that we divide things up like crazy. And so we need to allow them to come together. Really learn to let everything be non-different. And it's a great release and a great freedom, I think, when we can do this. That of course we would rather be very refined and brilliant, and so said this obnoxious thing, and you can spend like the next year thinking about what you wish you'd said, right? Just insightful, decisive, brilliant, right? You want to have great speech. And common here means just like ordinary and, blah, blah, blah. To see that they're different and just let them come together, right? Clear and murky, same thing. They can come together in the dark, they can be seen in the light, and both are important, Separate and not and separate. So that's us in the middle of this play, with our senses, trying to understand, trying to connect, grasping, letting go, standing up, lying down, and so on. And now we pivot to the context of that all this is happening in for a minute. This is a very thorough poem, actually. Now he's going to talk about the elements. And when we hear the 4 elements, it sounds it sounds extremely old-fashioned, which it is, I suppose. So we can read this as atomic physics if we want to, So here we're talking about the nature of the universe in which all this is happening, in which we are a part of, which we are. So the 4 elements is the universe. The 4 elements return to their natures, just as a child turns to its mother. Fire heats, wind moves, water wets, earth is solid. So we may see things, again, it's the same thing in so many different ways. We may see things as separate, and in a way they are. Earth is different from water, and fire is different from wind. Seems that way. And the elements are also understood in lots of other ways. It's not just sort of physics. It's like energetic and felt. We're made of the elements too. You can feel your air element and your water element and the solidity of your earth element and stuff. So they express themselves naturally, They don't need anything from us. That we're part of a universe that's already taken care of itself completely. Which we are. Since we are the elements, can we feel the way our nature is natural as a child turning to its mother? Fire heats means fire just does fire. Wind moves, wind just expresses wind. It doesn't need to try to do something else, Water wets, earth is solid. So can we just be ourselves naturally, right? Radically, naturally. And then we're back again to the senses. So there's really strong encouragement here for us to open the senses and tune in. Eye and sights, ear and sounds, nose and smells, tongue and tastes. Thus with each and everything, depending on these roots, the leaves spread forth. Trunk and branches share the essence, revered in common, each has its speech. So this is also to remind us that I have this sort of idea of sort of a me with an identity and a name, sort of standing at this sort of time horizon that I conceptualize as now. Some Buddhist teachers are very critical of all this stuff, all this talk about the present moment. It's like, well, it's just a made-up idea of the present moment. It's just a concept, which is true. So this is all to help us recognize this thing about roots and leaves, that this isn't just me here now, right? This is an expression of everything. So the roots is the whole universe, all these elements, the difference and the non-difference, the true nature of everything. So I'm expressing from these roots and then my reality is like leaves. At least that's how I'm looking at it. This particular part I have no idea exactly how Shirto meant it, or anything else really. And it is tremendously ironic to try to explain a poem that's all about let go of explaining, right? Yeah. So that's the first half of this poem. Let's just take a minute to kind of, you can gaze at it or close your eyes or just breathe a minute. See what bubbles up in you from all these images and words and ideas. How does this inform our living and our being and our understanding of who we are and how we should live? And please find yourself quietly in a group of 3. Take turns. Each person really gets a total space to speak their heart and see what bubbles up. What speaks to you in all this? What puzzles you? What interests you? What catches your attention? Is there anything from your life that this brings up to you or brings to mind? Or let's just have an exploration. And since we know that none of us understand this, dullness doesn't matter, right? There's no sharp or dull. Please free yourself from any idea that you're going to say something brilliant and impress anybody. Or the opposite, that you're going to say something dumb and not impress anybody. That neither of these is going to happen. Find a couple partners, decide who's first, and go. 3 is ideal. Maybe we end up with a 4, but try not to be in that 4. Look if there's a 3 that you could join, or a 2 that you could join to make a 3. There's a pair over here that's not willing to move, so if there's a free agent. 11 and 12. Oh, thank you, David. Oh, did you pop them in a breakout? You're brilliant. Thank you. You broke out them, or did they leave? Okay, and Brie already left. Oh well. Just when you're ready, first person. Others are just deeply listening. We just have a couple of minutes left, so if anybody hasn't spoken yet, you might want to rotate. Well, we've got to call time. Please thank your partners, and let's return to our spots to close the talk. Don't waste your time in vain, yeah. Some laughter in the darkness over there. Or is it in the light?